What's up, people? It's me, Average Iron, once again with another video after quite a couple of days of football cup action and football stuff and whatnot. And welcome to... And in today's episode, we got quite a lot of stuff to get through. A lot of matches have happened ever since the last episode. So this might be probably the longest episode at the time of this recording. But let's get through it. So starting off the League One playoff finals, which was Oxford versus Bolton, and Oxford has beaten Bolton, and now Oxford will be playing in the Championship, which is an interesting thought. We'll see how they do in the Championship in the next season, I suppose. Then next up is the Premier League wrap up, as the final match day has happened in the Premier League. The summary is really that for Liverpool, Klopp has left and Arne Slot era begins. For City, they did a 4-peat and 4 in a row victories as they battered West Ham 3-1. And Arsenal remains second for the second time. Because they finished second, next season they'll just have to fail less, I guess, after Aston Villa and Fulham respectively. Those two results costing them the title mostly. Lastly, Luton Town have relegated from the Prem. They spent one season in it. At least they have it. They can just say that they climbed all the way up. And now they can go back down and just be another team in the Championship once again. But at least they had their fun. They had their moments in the Prem. And finished above Burnley and Sheffield, which means they were the best out of the other two teams that have gone up in the previous season. But I digress about that. And yeah, Man United finished 8th, which was not great, but we moved, but I'll talk about that in a moment. Other than the Premier League, Bundesliga also wrapped up, and Leverkusen have won the Bundesliga and are invincible, but they still had the Europa League and the DFB Pokal to get through. They had 2 matches in which they needed to prove whether they can do the invincible treble or not. And then the Europa League final happened. It was Leverkusen against Atalanta. Obviously Atalanta was kind of a unstoppable force, whilst Leverkusen was kind of a immovable object. The shortest thing to say is that the streak is over, and Leverkusen has been completely decimated by Atalanta, all thanks to LOOKMAN, who scored a massive hat-trick, 3 goals in one match to literally demolish Leverkusen, which meant the streak was done and Leverkusen could only get a double in the DFB Pokal. But for Atalanta, they triumphed and they won their first ever Europa League. And the first Italian side to win it since Parma in 1999. And generally speaking, Leverkusen, despite the fact that they made it, they can still remain proud that they got the invincible in the Bundesliga. Because I don't think anyone else has done it, in modern football at least. That was the story of Leverkusen, and we shall see what Xabi Alonso can do next season, as he planned to remain, as everyone else thought he would just jump to Liverpool, but that was not the case, and that was the story for Leverkusen. They finished one chapter and on to the next. And speaking of another team that finished their story, it was the Manchester battle in the FA Cup final at Wembley, and guess who won? Man United! Get in! But overall, that match was absolutely crazy. I had a bit of a cold whilst watching that match. You can check out my reaction on TikTok. And generally speaking, that match was crazy. And all United fans, I think, thought that maybe we couldn't do it. Maybe because Erik ten Hag got sacked the day before. But no, Erik was still there. Everything was still groovy. And overall, United played fantastic football. Garnacho scored after Rashford just widened it all the way to the other side of the pitch. For Garnacho literally to run like there was no tomorrow. But Gvardiol basically slipped it and Garnacho just kept going and got the goal. 1-0 Man United. The second goal, it was just brilliant football from Erik. And Bruno with a beautiful pass to Kobe Mainu. And Kobe Mainu delivered the second goal. And Wembley was roaring. Well, one side of Wembley, the red one, was roaring like crazy. And what a game. What a game. Obviously, City just chucked a couple more shots off target, but they just couldn't get it in the net. The only player for Man City that did actually well was Doku, who managed to get through Onana and as Onana did slip it a little bit, which made it 2-1. But after 7 minutes of extra time and a couple more events and whatnot, Manchester United, FA Cup winners, once again, ever since the last time they won it in 2016 when Pardew danced and bowled. But this time, I think this one was more significant because we beat Pep Guardiola's Manchester City in a season in which Man United had so many injuries and generally finished 8th. And this mattered so much because now we have landed back in the Europa League for next season, and we shall see how that goes. And yeah, overall, United, come on! But other than the mayhem from the FA Cup, the next day also was the Championship Playoff final, which was Southampton against Leeds. And what would you know? Leeds bowled as Southampton scored 1 goal and made it back to the Premier League alongside Ipswich and Leicester. And those 3 teams, they're pretty good teams, to be fair. Leicester, top of the Championship, and managed to get through the Championship almost with ease. Well, they had a couple of hiccups here and there, but if they do not get deducted points for next season, they could do okay, I suppose, for a previous Premier League winner. And then there's Ipswich, which haven't been in the Premier League in a quite long time, and they could pretty much be like Burnley or Sheffield, just out there for one season and probably back in the Championship, unless more deductions happen for like teams like Nottingham or Everton. But that's for another time. The Premier League is still a long way from now, and I'll probably discuss my predictions about that at a later date, probably in a future video. But yeah, Championship Playoff final, Southampton, just 1 goal victory against Leeds. And that's about it. Leeds remain in the Championship, Southampton go up. And yeah. And in Romania news, Corvinu Hunedoara have been approved to participate in the Europa League, which they could face a variety of opponents. But it's just crazy that Corvinu Hunedoara is in Europe. They're playing European football. Probably for 2 matches, but it's a once in a lifetime thing. It's kind of like Panduri a couple years ago, but it's just going to be crazy. But also in Romania news, Botoșani stay up, and today we'll find out who also stay up or who will go up between Dinamo and Miercurea Ciuc. And lastly, the last notable thing was the Golden Generation's final friendlies, quote unquote, as the Golden Generation celebrated 30 years since their incredible performance. And it was a fun match as Jose Mourinho was there and a couple of other legends like Dida. But mostly the highlights are that Gheorghe Hagi still got it. The King still got it. The Carpathian Maradona has still got it. Many can say, oh, they're overshadowing the current generation, which are just levels below what the 1994 generation was. But we shall see at the Euros whether this generation could do something or flop like the 2016 team from back then when we played in France. Fingers crossed we can do it. I believe in my national team. Come on, Hai Romania. And lastly, Craiova made it in the Europa Conference League. And speaking of quick news, the other events that happened since my last episode were Crawley managed to go up in League 1 as the winners of the League 2 playoffs. Girona battered Granada 7-0 to wrap up their season and potentially go to the Champions League unless, because of their correlation with Manchester City, it's very debatable. Then the Old Firm happened again as Celtic won against Rangers in the Scottish Cup. And the French Cup, simple, PSG won it once again against Lyon, which is no surprise. And the Asian and African Champions Leagues, we had Al Ain win the Asian Champions League and Al Ahly triumphant in the second leg of the African Champions League, which means they will be in the Intercontinental Club World Cup thing, but also probably qualify to the extended Club World Cup, the 32 team one. But yeah, just a couple quick news. Also, the Women's Champions League final happened and Barcelona once again won. And speaking of Barcelona, also Xavi got resigned. Well, Xavi gone for Barcelona, and who knows who can Barcelona get at this point. And finally, to wrap up today's episode, I'll just predict the Conference League final, which will be between Fiorentina and Olympiacos. And I think it's going to be a close one. I mean, the Europa League final was just a one-sided affair for Atalanta, demolishing Leverkusen with LOOKMAN. But this one is different because Olympiacos are a good side. Fiorentina trying to get revenge after last year, bowling to West Ham in the final minute through Jared Bowen. And yeah, I think Fiorentina could do it, because if they do, they still got a game in hand with Atalanta to wrap up the Serie A. I'm thinking Fiorentina, but if Olympiacos wins, I'd be surprised. I mean, Atalanta was a pretty new, surprising victory, and Olympiacos will just should they win the Conference League, they can always flex on Panathinaikos and PAOK and AEK Athens that they have a European trophy and the others do not. And lastly, the main event of this weekend at Wembley Stadium, the Champions League final. It's Dortmund against Real Madrid, and it's big time. Bellingham versus Sancho, and so much more. And generally speaking, I hope Dortmund wins, but Real Madrid could easily get their like 15th Champions League, because they are the kings of Champions League finals basically. So Real Madrid have all the odds on them, whilst Dortmund, they have a lot, because it's also Royce's final match, as I've described probably in a previous episode. I do not want to jinx Dortmund basically. So Real Madrid will win. I think Real Madrid will win the Champions League. Saturday, we shall find out who will prevail. And that's about it for today's Football Weekly Ramblings. And yeah, I basically just talked about everything there is to talk about. Lots of things covered in today's episode. I think next week's episode will be probably just the Conference League and the Champions League discussions. And yeah, I think next week, as I said, this was a pretty long episode. And next week, probably a short episode. And yeah, after that, after the Champions League and everything else, I will make sure to have a Euro 2024 predictions video and a football shirt review for the Euro 2024 teams and whatnot. I've been Average Giant. This was Football Weekly Ramblings, and till next time.